Well, you look at this thing and you just scratch your head. I think people will take a look at that in the exhibition and their curiosity will be piqued. The second gallery of New York at its core is called World City, and it takes on the 20th century. Beginning in 1898, which is the year that New York became a 5-borough city, and going all the way up to 2012, the year of Superstorm Sandy. Every decade of the 20th century holds incredible drama in New York City. Casting our eye back to the early 20th century, the signature immigrant neighborhood of New York City is the Lower East Side. So if we want to understand how the city's changed, understanding those new arrivals is key to that.
It's nice to be here on the Lower East Side with you.
Well, this is my life, Lower East Side. We're at the intersection of what was the mercantile world of the Lower East Side, which was basically pushcarts. I mean, it was a matter of survival.
Walking down Orchard Street at the turn of the century would have been like walking through a cacophonous, crowded bazaar.
Families living in tiny tenements. The streets were jam-packed full of immigrants and pushcarts, people selling different types of wares.
There was a huge influx of immigrants coming in from Ellis Island from Southern and Eastern Europe, a huge new Jewish population. And this neighborhood became one of the most densely populated areas in the world. It was a difficult place to live. Your grandfather, Joel Russ, is an example of someone who took an opportunity and he built a business that has held on for 100 years.
Grandpa Russ had herring, schmaltz herring, in his pushcart, and that was a cheap source of protein for poor immigrants.
In 1914, he was able to open up a store.
The whole idea of an appetizing store goes back to Jewish dietary laws, where you have to separate meat and dairy.
It was a certain kind of shop that just didn't exist back in Europe. I reached out to you because we were looking for an intriguing artifact. You showed me something really interesting that I couldn't even tell what it was at first.
People come in, I say, "Can you tell me what that is?" And nobody would guess.
And what I also liked about it is it kind of has the form factor of a sewing machine. And then you look closer and you say, no, it's not a sewing machine, it's connected to food.
The apple core and peeler was mostly used to core and peel the Granny Smith apples for the chopped herring salad.
Grandpa Russ's innovation was to put apple in it, so that you're taking the basic immigrant food taste, but you're adapting it to what you have available and maybe to the taste change.
Yeah.
The apple core, of course, for us it's perfect because we're the Museum of the City of New York, the Big Apple, and that connection, taking the core out of the apples there on the Lower East Side is kind of a perfect poetic encapsulation of the story of New York City. We tried to capture the texture of this moment of the height of immigration to New York City through a variety of objects. We actually start in the old world. So we're borrowing a pair of candlesticks. One of them is pierced by a bullet from a pogrom. And that speaks to why were people uprooting their lives, picking up and coming to New York City. Very poignant. We speak about the passage across the ocean. We have a third-class steerage ticket for Carolina Coppola.
I think that the story of my grandfather, Joel Russ, while it's a Jewish story on the Lower East Side, I think it's very representational of all immigrant groups around that time. What happens when an immigrant comes here to the United States, does not speak the language, and doesn't have two nickels to rub together? How much of their own culture and food and dress and religion do they hold on to?
All of these classic appetizing foods, they're now iconic New York foods.
kind of an ongoing New York story, that food that comes to people's plates because of their ethnic traditions or out of necessity then gets transformed and adapted, and elevated into delicacies. Pieces of the Lower East Side as it existed in the early 20th century are still there. I think that the generations who fled those cold water flats would be astonished to see that 100 years after they lived there, it has become a very, very desirable neighborhood. And that's one of those moments of perpetual transformation that so characterizes New York.